Come for the bread, stay for the politics. I'm Ben Walsh, and this is Let Them Eat Bread. This week on Let Them Eat Bread, we are making what I think is a little too good to be true whole wheat loaf from jennycancook.com. So this whole recipe is only supposed to take an hour and a half if you don't count the mise en place time, and if you don't count the amount of time it spends to get the oven to get to the temperature you want it to do. In theory, you do that all now, but because I'm filming, my oven's not on yet. So I will be coming from a cold oven, but if you are starting your bread right now, your hour and a half bread and theoretically hour and a half timer, start your oven right now. You'll need it 375 Fahrenheit. So this bread is interesting for a number of reasons. One, as you saw on the shopping list this week, there are a number of things you can do with it to kind of change things up a little. But also, it'll be interesting to see because it's treating instant and active yeast the same. So as I mentioned, I'm using instant yeast this week. I'm using olive oil, I'm using honey, and I am using almond milk for my liquids this week. It'll be kind of interesting to see how this plays out, to see if it plays out as the instructor says it should. You know, we're going to trust the process. We'll see how it turns out. I would love to have a quick and easy honey wheat loaf recipe that I can do in 90 minutes, but something tells me it's not going to be that easy. Also, keep in mind, for the 90 minutes, the cook here, I guess her name is Jenny, is using a standing mixer. So because I'm doing everything by hand, I am not going to have the benefit of doing it that way. So I will be kneading by hand, which means that will probably take a little longer. But if you have a standing mixer, you should do that. And one more quick thing, because this bread has an incredibly quick rise, it rises 2 times and for a grand total of 45 minutes, 10 minutes in the middle, and then 35 minutes at the end. We're going to sneak our non-segment segment into the middle. Don't worry, when it's all cut up into videos, you won't even notice that that's the case, but we're going to stick it into there. I have some interesting thoughts from Yom HaShoah this week that I want to share with you if you watch the whole episode. And then we're going to stick our regular politics segment during that 35-minute rise. And, we'll cover a couple of stories there. It's not going to be a super long episode this week. I am starting very late in the day, unfortunately. So we'll just see what happens. But, all right, get your ingredients and let's get down to it.
All right, so we're going to take 2 cups of whole wheat flour and put that in a bowl, followed by half a cup of bread flour. Keep the bread flour round. You're going to need a lot more of it. Next up, a tablespoon of salt. You can add a little bit more, put a little bit less if you want. It's not going to affect it that much. Next up is going to be our yeast. We have 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, although you can use active dry. And we're just going to give this a quick stir before we move on. Next up is our cup of almond milk. We are heating this to 130 degrees approximately for our instant yeast and giving that a bit of a stir. Next up, our honey, 2 tablespoons of the honey here. If you're adding the honey, you have to put it in now with the milk. If you're using sugar, you should do it when you put in the rest of the dry ingredients. All right, so we've stirred that. Next goes in our olive oil. We have 2 tablespoons of this, and then 1 egg. And I'm not going to lie, I thought that was going to explode all over my face, so I ducked. Or closed my eyes, when the egg dropped in. Next up, we're going to mix this around until it's nice and battery, and we're going to pour it out onto our table, but not before we flour our work surface. You actually want to go with a very heavy flouring for this. This is essentially a batter that you're putting on here. So if you pour too much flour out like I did, don't worry about it because you're going to use all of it and then some. So once you have gotten your kind of batter on the table here, the job is to make it into a dough. So I am flouring the top of my dough here to just try and make it easier so it doesn't stick much. If you use a standing mixer to make this, you want to see that I'm doing slow turns, right? So push, turn, push, turn. It says to do 50 of those if you're coming out of a standing mixer. Of course, I'm doing everything by hand, so I'm just going to knead as usual. It will take a lot of flour, but eventually you will get to a state where you have a kneadable loaf of bread. The window pane test is not going to be a great test for this. It seems that for whole wheat breads that just doesn't work. I would use the poke test instead. So what that is you get it in, you put your bread into a ball like we always do, and then you put your finger into it, push down onto it, and the bread should spring back about 3/4 of the way, and that's how you know it's ready to rise. And we are about to be just finished.
All right, so our bread has been kneaded. You saw that I had to add a lot of flour to this recipe. So just be aware of that. If you're kneading by hand, you might need to add a lot of flour to get it to that tacky but not sticky consistency. All right, so this is going to rest for 10 minutes. And meanwhile, we're going to do our special segment and we'll continue with our regular segments later. So if you don't want to hang around for this, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Either way, we will be back doing bread in 10 minutes. So be back in 10 minutes.
We're now going to take our dough and push it out in all directions. So I'm using my palm for this. You can use a rolling pin if you like. Essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to use our palms to slowly push out the dough in every direction. And then once we are ready, we're going to roll that up as tightly as we can to make it into a log. We're going to put that log in our bread tin and then we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and a towel and then we'll be ready to go. As always, if you have something more sustainable, I highly recommend you use that, but I have plastic, so that is what I'm going to end up using.
All right, so our bread is starting to rise. It is a little cool in my house right now, so I am turning my oven on now to, one, get it preheated, and two, to make sure that we have a little bit more warmth in the house while our bread is rising. It says to leave it for 35 minutes, so I'm going to set a 35-minute timer. In reality, you should keep it rising until the loaf has either filled out the loaf tin, or if you're using a smaller loaf pan, which is what it calls for here, the loaf pan I'm using is a little too big, you need to wait until that loaf starts to peak above the loaf tin. But I'm just looking for it to fill out the loaf pan, okay? So I might go a little longer just kind of based on how it's doing, but we're going to start our politics portion, so set your timers for 35 minutes. I'm going to do some quick cleanup real quick, and then we're going to start our politics portion. So with that in mind, set your timers, make sure that your bread is covered, and I will be right back. All right, so we have our bread here. I'm just going to do the big reveal. Wow! Actually, it looks really good. It looks really good. I was actually a little worried that the bread was going to be a little dry. We have a really lovely bread here. So what I'm going to do, my oven is preheated. I am going to give this a little score. Thanks, Uncle George, for the knife. I'm just going to run my blade along here 3 times. Give it that nice look there. There you go. And now we're going to put this in the oven for 35 minutes, okay? When you have it in the oven, you want to make sure that you leave it in there, okay? Sorry, 30 minutes. There you go. For 30 minutes. Once it's in there, you want to make sure that you're watching it because if it browns too much, it can burn because we're a little higher than you typically bake a bread and it has nothing on it to protect it, okay? We don't have anything else. If you want a harder crust, you can paint some water over this. If you want a softer crust, you can paint some milk. If you want a golden crust, you can paint some egg. Whatever you want, do it that way. I'm going to put mine in plain because that's what the recipe specifies. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. Bye now.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. All right, guys, see you next time. Bye for now.